my name is Professor Petrasik. Welcome to the course, An Introduction to International Human Rights Law. In this short clip, I'll do two things. I will introduce myself, and secondly, I'll say a few words about what I hope you will learn by participating in this course. First, about me. I'm an international lawyer. I studied in Canada and abroad for over 20 years. Up until about 2010, I was mainly employed doing international human rights advocacy. I worked with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, the United Nations, and private foundations. My work was based out of London, Geneva, and New York, but I traveled extensively, and I was involved in examining the human rights situation in dozens of countries. During that time, I was on occasion teaching. I taught in Canada, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, but for the most part, I was a practitioner. I only became a full-time academic in 2010. All of which is just to say this course will have a strong emphasis on both the theory and practice of international human rights law. I'll bring both aspects to our discussions. My own research interests in this field are wide-ranging. I have in the past and still do work on human rights in business, on poverty and human rights, and on human rights issues related to armed conflict. I also study issues related to international justice and accountability for perpetrators of human rights abuse. I teach full-time at the University of Ottawa's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. And additionally, I'm the senior editor at Open Global Rights, a multilingual online forum for both scholars and practitioners. I encourage you to follow the debates on that forum as they touch on many of the issues that will arise in the course. You can find it here. Secondly, and more importantly, what does this course aim to achieve? In your materials, you will see a list of learning objectives for the overall course and for each separate module. Put simply, the overall aim is to give you a basic understanding of international human rights law and the ways in which international institutions, mainly through the United Nations, are empowered to enforce that law. That sounds rather technical. International laws, institutions. It perhaps brings to mind weighty books full of treaties, boring intergovernmental conferences, and complicated international procedures. It is all that. And I'm afraid to say it, but you will need to read some of those international treaties, and you will need to learn about some of these institutions and their procedures. But there's something more at issue, something more fundamental. This body of international law, beginning with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, is really about a promise, or actually a series of promises. First, a promise to the past victims that, in the wake of the atrocities of World War II, never again will states be allowed to claim that how they treated their own citizens or civilians under their control was just their own business. Crimes against humanity, genocide, and war crimes would be punished. In creating and joining the United Nations, states promised to do better, to build a world where the powerful are not free to treat people within their borders as they see fit. Just as international rules regulate shipping on the high seas or diplomatic protection or trade disputes, states agree that international law should set limits on the way they treat their own people. Membership in the United Nations would be contingent on accepting the legitimacy of international concern for human rights. It was also about a promise to the future, that the UN and its member states would build an international law of human rights and the mechanisms to enforce it, so that in the future, states are not able to claim immunity from international scrutiny. The idea was to start small with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but the law would grow in legitimacy and effectiveness. Now, in case you think I'm a starry-eyed romantic, I'll be the first to say these promises have gone largely unfulfilled. Crimes against humanity go unpunished. Look at Syria today. The UN is unable to act to halt atrocities. Powerful states may join international human rights treaties, but they regularly breach their rules. All true. However, what too few people appreciate is the extent to which some part of these promises, of each of these promises, has been met. We have an international criminal court, and there have been trials and imprisonment of former dictators and torturers in many countries. UN action sometimes does lead governments to change laws, and today almost no UN member state claims it's immune from international scrutiny. Children's rights, women's rights, the rights of refugees, the disabled, sexual minorities, indigenous people, the poor, all their rights have been advanced due to international legal initiatives. We've been successful in banning dangerous weapons, dramatically reducing the use of the death penalty, advancing free expression worldwide, and in many other areas. Okay, so what this course is really about is the struggle over the past several decades to fulfill those promises. The promise of a world where human rights are respected. It's about a long process, begun in the wake of World War II and ongoing today, to persuade, shame, and force states to live up to the promises they made in joining the United Nations. In this course, you will learn the reasons for both the failures and successes along the way, as the aspiration to use international law to enforce basic rules of human dignity and well-being meets the reality of international politics. It is my hope that if you are both inspired by the original promise and understand the reasons we continue to fall short of meeting it, you will be best equipped to contribute in whatever way you can to this ongoing struggle. It's with this objective in mind that I will guide you through the international law of human rights and the international institutions that are empowered to enforce that law. I very much look forward to our discussions in this course. Thank you.